The elderly man stood near the entrance of the hotel lobby, his wooden cane firmly gripped in his hand. The polished brown leather shoes on his feet made a soft click as he shifted his weight, a sign of years of walking with purpose. His dark skin contrasted against the light of the lobby, and his short white hair gave him a distinguished look. Although his expression was calm, there was a slight hint of confusion in his eyes, as if he were trying to place something familiar that had suddenly changed. The hotel was bustling with activity, guests checking in, others sitting on plush chairs, talking quietly amongst themselves. The man had walked in slowly, carefully, his eyes taking in the space around him. Everything seemed brighter, more polished than he remembered, but there were still details that felt familiar. He stood still for a moment, trying to recall the last time he had been here, his mind drifting back to the days when he had helped build this very place. The security guard, a tall man with fair skin and buzz-cut light brown hair, was standing just a few feet away. His dark navy blue uniform, complete with a gold-and-silver badge, seemed to give him a presence of authority. His expression was stern and commanding, and he was watching the elderly man closely, as if waiting for something. The guard's boots squeaked lightly on the polished floor as he shifted, taking a step closer to the elderly man. With a quick motion, the guard pointed toward the entrance, his finger aimed firmly at the door. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice strong and clear. "This area is for guests only. You'll have to leave." The words were direct, almost abrupt. It was clear he had dealt with situations like this before, but the old man did not respond immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if trying to understand why he was being asked to leave. The elderly man's gaze met the guard's. There was no anger in his eyes, only a calm dignity. His hand rested on the carved handle of his cane, the intricate patterns on the wood a subtle reminder of his past. The guard stood firm, his eyes narrowing, as if he was expecting a protest or an argument. But the old man simply blinked, as if the situation was slightly amusing to him. He didn't seem angry, just confused by the sudden demand. "I'm not sure what you mean," the elderly man replied, his voice low but steady. His words were soft, but there was no mistaking the hint of authority in them. He shifted his weight again, glancing around the lobby once more, before returning his gaze to the security guard. The guard took a step closer, not letting the elderly man move without his direction. The tension in the air was thick. The elderly man was used to being seen, to being respected, but here he was, standing in a lobby he once helped build, being asked to leave as though he didn't belong. The elderly man looked around the lobby again, trying to make sense of what was happening. He could feel the weight of the security guard's gaze on him. His wooden cane tapped softly on the floor as he shifted his weight, standing tall and steady, despite the confusion that was beginning to fill his mind. He knew this place. He had worked here, helped build it. And now someone was telling him to leave. The thought of it didn't make sense. The guard's voice broke through the silence again. "Sir, you need to leave. I'm going to have to escort you out if you don't," he said, his words firm and direct. There was no warmth in his tone, only a clear sense of authority. The elderly man took a slow, deep breath and glanced at the guard. His face remained calm, but his eyes held a trace of something deeper, a quiet frustration. He spoke again, his voice steady. "I built this place," he said. His words weren't loud, but there was weight to them. The guard paused, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected response. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unsure whether he had heard the elderly man correctly. "What do you mean you built this place?" the guard asked, his tone skeptical. The old man nodded, as if the memory had just come rushing back. "This hotel, I helped design it, laid down the first brick, worked on every part of it." He gestured to the lobby around him, his eyes lingering on the large chandelier above. "This was my work, my team's work." The security guard looked around, his eyes scanning the lobby. He glanced at the elderly man again, trying to read his face, but there was no sign of deceit, no sign of trickery. The old man wasn't acting like someone who was making up a story. He was calm, steady, and the way he spoke was not boastful, but simply factual. The guard shifted his weight, still not completely convinced. "Sir, this is a high-end hotel. We get a lot of people here who think they can just walk in and pretend to be something they're not." He looked the elderly man up and down, still trying to figure out who he really was. "If you don't leave now, I'm going to have to call someone else." The elderly man's eyes narrowed slightly, but his posture didn't change. He had dealt with this kind of doubt before, many years ago, when he was still working. He had faced challenges, and he had learned how to stand his ground. But this situation felt different. It was his own creation, the place that had been a part of his life for so long, and now he was being treated like an outsider. He wasn't angry, though. Instead, he nodded, as if he understood the guard's position. "I understand," the elderly man said, "but I'm not leaving just yet." He stepped back slightly, his cane tapping gently against the floor. "I want to see the manager. I think they'll remember me." The security guard hesitated for a moment, uncertain of what to do. He wasn't sure whether to keep pressing or let the situation unfold. The elderly man stood his ground, looking around the lobby, as if waiting for someone to step in, someone who would understand. The elderly man stood still, his cane resting lightly on the floor, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He could feel the guard's eyes still on him, but he remained calm, waiting. It wasn't the first time he had been questioned, nor the first time his identity had been doubted. Over the years, he had faced a lot of challenges. Some were about the work he did, and others were simply about who he was. But today, standing in the lobby of the place he helped build, he felt a strange mix of pride and frustration. The security guard, still uncertain, took out his radio and spoke quietly into it. "We might need some help up here," he said, his tone low but firm. Moments later, the sound of footsteps echoed through the lobby. The elderly man glanced toward the door, expecting someone to come over. A few seconds later, a woman stepped into view. She was in her mid-40s, dressed in a sharp suit, and she looked around the lobby with authority. When she saw the elderly man standing near the entrance, she paused for a moment. The way the security guard was standing near him told her something wasn't quite right. She walked over quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor as she approached them. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge of professionalism. The security guard stepped aside and nodded toward the elderly man. "This man is refusing to leave. He says he helped build this place, but I'm not sure about that." The woman looked at the elderly man, her eyes scanning him for clues. The elderly man met her gaze and spoke without hesitation. "I'm Mr. Jenkins. I worked on this hotel in the early 70s. I was the foreman during the construction." He paused, allowing his words to settle. "This place, it's part of my history. I laid the first bricks. This lobby, the foundation, it's all my work." The woman's expression softened as she considered his words. She didn't respond immediately, but instead looked at the security guard, who stood quietly nearby, still unsure of what to do. The woman turned back to Mr. Jenkins. "Mr. Jenkins, is it?" she asked. He nodded. "Do you have any identification or anything to show that you were part of the team that worked here?" she asked gently. Mr. Jenkins thought for a moment, and then reached into the pocket of his brown blazer. He pulled out an old, worn photo of a construction crew standing in front of the nearly completed hotel. The edges of the photo were frayed, and the colors had faded over time, but there was no mistaking the man standing in the middle of the group. It was him, Mr. Jenkins, holding a hammer, his face serious but proud. The woman took the photo and looked at it closely, her eyes widening as she recognized him. "Wait a minute. This photo is from when we were still building this place," she said, her voice quiet with realization. "I remember now. My father used to talk about you. He worked on the project too." Mr. Jenkins gave a small nod. "That's right. Your father and I worked side by side for years." His tone was steady, but there was a warmth in his voice as he spoke of the past. The woman smiled faintly, looking at the photo again before handing it back to him. "I apologize for the confusion, Mr. Jenkins. We didn't realize." She turned to the guard and said, "Let's make sure we don't treat someone like this again." The security guard, looking embarrassed, nodded quickly. "Of course, ma'am." "I'm sorry, sir." Mr. Jenkins nodded back, a slight smile playing on his face as he looked around the lobby once more. He wasn't angry anymore, just content to know that the place he helped create still stood strong, even if it had forgotten its roots for a while. The elderly man, Mr. Jenkins, stood calmly as the manager continued to apologize. The woman who had spoken to him earlier, still looking a little embarrassed, gave him a warm smile. "I'm truly sorry for the misunderstanding," she said. "This place means a lot to so many people, but we should have recognized you right away." Mr. Jenkins nodded slowly, not seeming upset, but rather reflecting on the years that had passed. The guard, now clearly uncomfortable with the situation, stood a little further back, still looking at Mr. Jenkins with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. The manager turned back to the elderly man and motioned toward a chair near the lounge area. "Please, sit down," she said kindly. "Let's get you something to drink. I'd like to hear more about the work you did here." Mr. Jenkins hesitated for a moment, but then walked over to the chair, settling down slowly. The cane was placed beside him, and he let out a soft sigh. "It's been a long time since I've been back here," he said quietly, looking around the lobby again. The manager signaled to a nearby staff member to bring a cup of tea, and the young woman quickly disappeared toward the bar area. "I remember when this place was just an empty lot," Mr. Jenkins continued, his eyes now distant as if lost in the past. "Just dirt and gravel. We spent so many long days here, trying to get everything right. There were challenges, yes, but there was also pride in knowing we were building something that would last." The manager listened carefully, hanging on every word. "How did you get started on this project?" she asked. Mr. Jenkins smiled slightly, his hands resting on the arms of the chair. "Well, I was just another worker at first, but they saw something in me. I had experience, and when the foreman position opened up, they offered it to me. It was an honor." A young staff member returned with the tea, carefully setting it down in front of him. Mr. Jenkins nodded his thanks and took a slow sip, the warmth of the drink filling him with a sense of comfort. "Back then, we worked long hours," he said, "but we had a goal. We wanted to build something that would stand the test of time, something people would remember." The manager sat down across from him, her face thoughtful. "And you succeeded. This hotel has been around for so long. I know we get people from all over the world who come here to stay." She paused for a moment. "Do you ever come back here often?" Mr. Jenkins chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, not as much as I'd like. Life gets busy, but I do think about it sometimes, especially when I walk into a place like this. It brings back memories. Good memories." The manager smiled warmly. "I can't imagine how proud you must be to see it still standing after all these years. And Mr. Jenkins, I just want you to know that your work here is still valued. We'll make sure that the history of this place is remembered." Mr. Jenkins looked at her for a moment, his face softening. "Thank you," he said simply. "It's good to know that what we built didn't go forgotten." The conversation continued for a while longer, with Mr. Jenkins sharing stories from the past and the manager listening attentively. Though time had passed, it was clear that the connection to the hotel ran deep for him. It wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was about the people who worked hard to make it what it was. As Mr. Jenkins sat in the lounge, sipping his tea, the conversation with the manager began to flow more naturally. He found himself reminiscing about the long days of construction, the teamwork, and the pride that came with each completed section of the hotel. The manager, still listening closely, asked more questions, eager to learn about the history that had shaped the place she worked in. Just as Mr. Jenkins was sharing a memory about the crew working on the roof, The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. A woman, probably in her late 30s, approached them, her eyes wide with recognition. She looked at Mr. Jenkins, and then at the manager, clearly surprised. "Mr. Jenkins?" she asked, her voice tentative. The elderly man looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to place her face. She smiled at him, then added, "You probably don't remember me, but my father worked here when you were overseeing the construction." Mr. Jenkins blinked, and for a moment, there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Wait a minute," he said. "You're—" He paused, trying to recall her name. She nodded. "I'm Sarah. My father, he was one of the carpenters who worked under you." Mr. Jenkins smiled, the memory now clearer. "Why, yes, I remember. He was good with his hands. Always knew how to make the work look easy." Sarah's face lit up, and she stepped closer, pulling out an old photograph from her bag. "This is the photo of the crew," she said, handing it to him. "I found it in my father's things after he passed." Mr. Jenkins took the photograph, his fingers gently brushing over the faded edges. The faces in the picture were younger, but the setting was unmistakable, the site of the hotel. He looked at Sarah and nodded, his eyes softening. "He was a good man," he said quietly. "I'm glad you kept this." Sarah smiled faintly, her eyes lingering on the photo as she spoke. "My father always spoke highly of you. He said you were a leader, someone who knew how to get the job done and make everyone feel like part of the team." Mr. Jenkins gave a small, humble nod. "We all worked together. No one person can do it all. But it was a good group." Sarah nodded in agreement. "I've heard a lot of stories about those days," she said. "It's nice to know some of them are true." Just then, the manager, still sitting across from Mr. Jenkins, stood up and smiled at the two of them. "It's clear that this place holds a lot of memories," she said. "Mr. Jenkins, I think we've all learned something today." She paused and then turned to Sarah. "Thank you for sharing the photo. I'm sure your father would be proud of the work that was done here." Sarah nodded, a quiet sense of pride filling her. "He would be happy to know this place is still standing." Mr. Jenkins sat back, looking around the lobby once more, his gaze lingering on the familiar details. Though years had passed, the memories of those early days were still alive in the walls, in the bricks, and in the people who had built it all together. As he looked at Sarah and the manager, he realized that even though the years had changed everything, some things, like the respect for hard work, had remained the same. As the conversation continued, Mr. Jenkins felt a sense of warmth spread through him. It wasn't just because of the tea or the comfortable chair, but because he could feel that the people around him were beginning to understand just how much this hotel meant to him. It was more than just a building. It was a piece of his life, a chapter that he could never forget. The manager, still standing, glanced at her watch and then at Mr. Jenkins. "I have to attend a meeting in a little while," she said. "But before I go, I'd like to offer something. We have a small museum inside the hotel, mostly for guests. But I think it would be fitting to add a small display about the history of the hotel and the people who built it, including you." Mr. Jenkins was taken aback. He had never expected anything like that. "You want to put my name in a museum?" he asked, his voice slightly surprised. The manager smiled and nodded. "You played a huge part in the creation of this place. It only makes sense for people to know who helped make this hotel what it is today." For a moment, Mr. Jenkins was silent, as if processing the offer. He wasn't one for attention or recognition. He had always preferred to let his work speak for itself. But this was different. This wasn't about him. It was about honoring the people who had worked alongside him. The people who had put in long hours, the ones who had helped build this hotel from the ground up. "I'm honored," he finally said, his voice quiet. "But it's not just me. It was everyone. The crew, the workers, the carpenters, the laborers. We all played a part in this." The manager nodded. "Of course. And that's why I want to include the history of the entire team. not just you. But we need someone to help us with the details. Your insight, your stories, they're important. Mr. Jenkins thought for a moment, then agreed. All right, I'll help. I'll share what I remember. Just as the manager was about to respond, another voice interrupted. A younger man, likely in his 20s, stepped into the lounge. He was wearing a casual shirt and jeans, his expression curious as he looked toward the group. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice polite. "But is this the famous Mr. Jenkins?" he asked, looking at the elderly man with a smile. Mr. Jenkins looked at him, puzzled for a moment, before nodding. "I suppose it is," he said with a small chuckle. The young man smiled and walked closer, extending his hand. "I've heard stories about you. I work here now, and I've been learning about the history of the hotel. It's an honor to meet you." The unexpected recognition brought a smile to Mr. Jenkins' face. "Well, it's nice to meet you too," he said, shaking the young man's hand. "I'm glad to know that the hotel is still in good hands." The young man nodded eagerly. "We all know how important this place is, and we're proud to be part of it." Mr. Jenkins glanced around the room, taking in the faces of the manager, Sarah, the young man, and the staff who had been involved in the conversation. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of connection to the place again. The hotel wasn't just a building, it was a part of him, and the people here had helped keep its spirit alive. "Well," Mr. Jenkins said, standing up with the help of his cane, "I think it's time for me to go, but I'll be back soon. I have more stories to share." The manager, Sarah, and the young man all nodded, smiling warmly as they watched him head toward the door. "We look forward to hearing them," the manager said. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for everything." With one last look around the lobby, Mr. Jenkins stepped out into the world outside, a little lighter than before, knowing that the legacy of the hotel would continue to be told for generations to come. Mr. Jenkins left the hotel feeling a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in years. As he walked slowly down the street, his cane tapping against the pavement, he thought about everything that had happened that day. He had never expected to be recognized, let alone honored for the work he had done so many years ago. But there was something about seeing the people who cared for the place now, the people who worked there, that made him feel like his time and effort had been worthwhile. As he made his way back to his small apartment, he couldn't help but smile. Even at his age, it was clear that the work he had done all those years ago was still appreciated. The memories of the construction site, the long hours spent working side by side with the team, came flooding back. He remembered the laughter, the struggles, and the satisfaction of watching the hotel slowly take shape. When he reached his apartment, he put his cane aside and sat down in his favorite armchair. The room was quiet, save for the hum of the city outside. He didn't have much, but he didn't need much. The apartment was small, just enough for him to live comfortably. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the day lift from his shoulders. The next morning, as he sat at his small kitchen table drinking his coffee, he thought about the museum display the manager had mentioned. It wasn't something he had ever thought about before, but now that it was a real possibility, he felt a sense of responsibility to share the history. It wasn't just about him. It was about the team he had worked with, the men and women who had helped bring the hotel to life. He could already picture the photos, the old blueprints, and the stories they would tell. He had already decided that he would go back to the hotel soon. He would help them with the display, tell them everything he could remember about those early days. The thought of it brought a sense of purpose, something he hadn't realized he was missing. It was like a connection to the past that he had almost forgotten. As the days passed, Mr. Jenkins returned to the hotel several times. He met with the manager, Sarah, and the young staff members, sharing stories and memories of the past. They listened intently, eager to learn more about the history of the building and the people who had made it all possible. The museum display began to take shape, with old photographs and tools from the construction site, each piece carefully placed to tell the story of the hotel's creation. Eventually, the display was finished. A small section of the hotel's lobby was dedicated to the history of its construction, and Mr. Jenkins stood there, proud of what they had accomplished. It wasn't just about the building. It was about the people, the workers who had made it happen. As he looked at the display, he felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that future generations would understand the work that went into making the hotel what it was. The manager approached him, a smile on her face. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," she said. "This means so much to us, and to everyone who works here. Your story is now a part of this hotel's history." Mr. Jenkins nodded, his face softening with gratitude. "Thank you for remembering," he replied. "It's good to know that it won't be forgotten." He turned and looked at the display once more before walking away. As he left the hotel, he felt like he had finally come full circle, his work now a permanent part of the place he had helped create. A few weeks had passed since the display about the hotel's history was completed, and Mr. Jenkins found himself visiting the place more often. Each time he walked through the lobby, he would stop by the display, admiring the photos and stories that now hung on the walls. It was strange to see his own name there, but he was pleased to see the faces of those who had worked alongside him, the people who had helped build the hotel from the ground up. One afternoon, Mr. Jenkins was sitting in the lobby, his cane resting beside him, when a family walked in. They were tourists, their faces filled with excitement as they looked around at the hotel's grandeur. The father of the family noticed the display on the wall and walked over, his eyes scanning the information. "Hey, look at this," he said to his wife, pointing at a photo of a younger Mr. Jenkins standing with a group of workers. "This hotel was built by a team of people, and it looks like they've got a whole section dedicated to the history here." The mother and children joined him, and they all began reading about the hotel's construction. The father smiled, then looked over at Mr. Jenkins, who was sitting nearby. "Hey, are you part of this history?" he asked with a friendly tone. Mr. Jenkins, though not one to seek attention, smiled and nodded. "Yes, I helped build this place many years ago," he replied. "I was part of the team that worked on it." The family seemed surprised, and the father chuckled. "Well, that's amazing. It's nice to meet someone who was involved in something so important." The wife stepped closer and said, "We're staying here for a few days, and it's nice to know that the hotel has such a rich history behind it." Mr. Jenkins smiled warmly. "This hotel has been a part of many people's lives. It's more than just a building. It holds a lot of memories for the people who worked here." The children, who had been quietly listening, looked up at Mr. Jenkins with wide eyes. "Did you help make the rooms?" the younger of the two asked, her voice full of curiosity. Mr. Jenkins chuckled softly. "Well, I didn't make the rooms, but I helped build the foundation and the structure. It's a little like putting together a big puzzle. Everyone plays a part." The family spent a little more time looking at the display, chatting with Mr. Jenkins about the hotel's history. After a while, they thanked him for sharing his story and continued their tour of the hotel. As they walked away, Mr. Jenkins felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had shared a piece of the hotel's history with them, just as he had done with the hotel staff and others who had come to appreciate the work that had gone into creating the place. As he watched them leave, he realized that the hotel's legacy was alive and well, not just in the building itself, but in the people who continued to visit and work there. He felt proud of the part he had played, knowing that the hotel would continue to stand as a testament to the hard work and dedication of so many people. It wasn't just a building. It was a story that would be remembered for years to come.